answers? I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
No second plane. It was a bomb. Bombed another building, not second plane. That was a bomb. Who said the second plane?
That's what we're told, the second plane.
No,
we saw it on television.
I saw everything.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. This is...
Idea of how much of the plane actually impacted the building.
You know, it might have appeared that way, but from my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon. The only site is the actual side of the building that's crashed in, and as I said, the only pieces left that you can see are small enough that you could pick up in your hand. There are no large tail sections, wing sections, a fuselage, nothing like that anywhere around, which would indicate that the entire plane crashed into the side of the Pentagon and then caused the side to collapse. Now, even though if you look at the pictures of the Pentagon, you see that the floors have all collapsed, that didn't happen immediately. It wasn't until almost about 45 minutes later that the structure was weakened enough that all of the floors collapsed.
Jeff, it's a United Airlines plane. It's believed to be at that site outside Pittsburgh, isn't it?
That's exactly right, John, with 45 people total on board. And one of the more profound things today, the imprint of terrorism seared not only on Wall Street, but also on Main Street. Here you have an area 80 miles to the southeast of Pittsburgh, and this plane, which went down at about 10 o'clock this morning. We have rescue vehicles that came in earlier in the day, and they have turned up nothing. No one believed to be alive from this crash. Some of the media just getting back to the scene, which is about a quarter of a mile up on a hill back behind me, and so some of the first pictures just starting to come in within the last hour. I want to get quickly to Chris Kanicki. He's a photographer with the Pittsburgh affiliate of Fox affiliate. He was back there just a couple of minutes ago, and Chris, I've seen the pictures. It looks like there's nothing there except for a hole in the ground.
Basically, that's right. The only thing you could see from where we were was a big gouge in the earth and some broken trees. We could see some people walking around in the area, but from where we could see, there wasn't much left.
Any large pieces of debris at all?
No, there was nothing that you could distinguish that a plane had crashed there.
Smoke, fire?
Nothing. It was absolutely quiet. It was actually very quiet. Nothing going on down there, no smoke, no fire, just a couple of people walking around. They look like part of the NTSB crew walking around looking at the pieces.
How big would you say that hole was?
From my estimates, I would guess it was probably about 20 to 15 feet long and probably about 10 feet long or 10 feet wide.
What could you see on the ground, if anything, other than dirt and ash? And
you couldn't see anything. You could just see dirt, ash, and people walking around, broken trees.
Says that City Hall in Oakland will remain open. It will be business as usual. He is urging people to remain calm given what is going on, remain calm. Oakland City Hall will remain open, but in San Francisco, City Hall has been closed. We're also just getting word here now that a second United Airlines jet, Flight 175, from Boston to Los Angeles is now missing. Again, if you're just joining us, there have been 4 separate plane crashes. 3 of those planes were en route to California. 2 were heading to LAX. The 3rd was heading to San Francisco International Airport.
That was specifically the one heading to SFO, United Flight number 93 from Newark to SFO. It apparently crashed in Pennsylvania, fairly close to the border of Maryland and not too far from Camp David. Why is that significant? Because one of the groups possibly claiming responsibility for all these terrorist attacks is the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and it was this week in 1978 that the Camp David Accords were reached. Is there a connection? At this point, we don't know, but it is important to be aware of that situation. In Washington, D.C., many congressional leaders have been transferred to a secret location. Some senators have described this as a second Pearl Harbor. And President Bush was in Florida this morning, but he made a brief announcement when the first attacks were clear on the World Trade Center, and he was heading back to Washington, D.C. At this point, we don't know exactly where he is. They're not really broadcasting that information, but we are told that the president is safe right now.
We're waiting for a press conference to start in San Francisco from the Office of Emergency Services to discuss what the situation, what the city's reaction to all of this is going to be. But again, right now in San Francisco.
Pentagon, the day before 9/11, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld declared war, not on foreign terrorists.
The adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon bureaucracy.
He said money wasted by the military poses a serious threat.
In fact, it could be said that it's a matter of life and death.
Rumsfeld promised change, but the next day, the world changed. And in the rush to fund the war on terrorism, the war on waste seems to have been forgotten.
My 03 budget calls for more than $48 billion in new defense spending.
More money for the Pentagon when its own auditors admit the military cannot account for 25% of what it already spends.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
$2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America. To understand how the Pentagon can lose track of trillions, consider the case of one military accountant who tried to find out what happened to a mere $300 million.
We know it's gone, but we don't know what they spent it on.
Jim Minery, a former Marine turned whistleblower, is risking his job by speaking out for the first time about the millions he noticed were missing from one defense.
Okay, what data finally convinced you that 9/11 was not just by 19 hijackers? You know, the final convincing was this molten metal that I learned about. And pretty quick, I'm learning about molten metal pools under both towers after they collapsed, and Building 7. Now, Building 7 wasn't even hit by a jet, you know, and yet it comes down, and then it's got this molten metal underneath. And where'd that come from? I mean, you know, I hear people say, well, that would be from the metal of the planes. Well, that might work for the towers, possibly, but it sure doesn't work for Building 7. You know, it was 300 plus feet away from the North Tower, and no plane hit it. So where does this molten metal come from?
This is how it's been since day one. Oh, it's unbelievable. And this is 6 weeks later, almost 6 weeks later. And as we get closer to the center of this, it gets hotter and hotter. It's probably 1,500 degrees. We've had some small windows into what we thought was a core at some point, and it looked like an oven. You know, it was just roaring inside. And it's just a bright, bright reddish orange color. See that stuff he's pulling out? What was that, Chief? We're gonna hold off on the water. See the stuff he's pulling out? Yeah. It's red hot. If we hit it too much steam, you won't be able to see what he's doing. Great.
I studied various aspects, and the molten metal is my first topic. It's the one that really caught my interest, and the data is just coming together. Now, I have a sample of this molten metal. Previously, molten metal here. Just a tiny sample. This is really all we need. I brought along with me at the last minute. I thought, well, I'll throw that in. And by analyzing this, we determined it is not molten aluminum from the plane. Okay. Indeed, it contains a great deal of iron, which is the product of the thermite reaction.
This is thermite. It's a powdered mixture of iron oxide and aluminium, which when ignited burns at 2,500 degrees Celsius, which is very, very hot. Packed into the slow-release mechanism of a garden flower pot, the thermite is ready for action. Just light the touch paper and stand well back. The fuse triggers the irreversible thermite reaction. As scorching hot meets freezing cold, a fierce battle rages. The smoke clears, and incredibly, nothing remains. As the thermite burns at 2,500 degrees, it releases a raging torrent of molten iron, which rains down upon the liquid nitrogen, boiling the glacial mixture away in a plume of vapor and melting the cylinder, leaving just a puddle of white-hot iron. A clear victory for thermite. The engine block is the densest part of a car. It's basically a huge lump of metal, and, well, it's very hard to melt. Lucky then, the Brainiacs have plenty of thermite, specially packed into the slow-release mechanism of a garden flower pot. A big pile on the bonnet directly over the engine block should do the trick. The irreversible thermite reaction begins. Within seconds, the fiery concoction eats through the bonnet, spraying molten thermite into the engine beneath. The devastation continues inside until finally a torrent of white-hot liquid metal pours out of the bottom, signaling the inevitable victory for thermite. A quick check confirms a clear path of destruction through the engine.
Now this thermite is so hot, this molten iron, especially when you mix sulfur in. Now it's called thermate. So sulfur added to this molten iron, it'll just cut through steel, through structural steel, for example, like a knife through butter. And we also see this molten, yellow-hot molten metal with white wispy ash pouring out of the South Tower just minutes before its collapse. And I've shown this video, and it's just amazing. The photographs of that, it's in the NIST report. They say, well, probably molten aluminum from the aircraft. No, sorry, it's not. We did experiments at BYU. See, that was in the New York Times as the sulfidation of the steel came out. You know, World Trade Center 7, there's no airplane that hit it. And so how do you explain this? And then the towers too. And the New York Times said this is the greatest mystery uncovered so far. On that, the molten metal pools indicate in this case, a large amount of incendiary or explosive material. Super thermite is explosive. Ordinary thermite and thermate are incendiaries. It's true that when you add sulfur to the thermite, it now cuts very quickly through steel. And again, do you remember earlier I spoke of this paper I read? These metallurgists in Massachusetts had looked at World Trade Center 7 steel and some from the towers also. Strange, they said, that high temperature sulfidation, where does this sulfur come? Where do these high temperatures come from? Well, the answer, you see, we're getting at, it's totally consistent with this thermate. Strange, they said, that high temperature sulfidation, where does this sulfur come? Where do these high temperatures come from? Well, the answer, you see, we're getting at, it's totally consistent with this thermate.
Mr. President, I do want to get right to the news of this week.
Sure.
The terrorism in Boston.
Yeah.
Many people have wondered if it took you right back to 9/11 when you heard it.
Well, at first, you know, I was deeply concerned that there might have been a organized plot. I don't know all the facts. I don't think we all know all the facts, but I was deeply concerned that this could have been you know, another organized, highly organized attack on the country. And it still may be. Again, I don't know the facts, but I do know that it's really hard to protect the homeland.
Is the United States supporting al-Qaeda in Syria? The answer is yes.
Fact number one, there is no question that al-Qaeda fighters are part of the opposition forces attempting to overthrow Syria's government. Fact number two, the creation of al-Qaeda wasn't Islamic fundamentalism. It was the CIA. The Mujahideen was created by the CIA to cause problems for the Soviets. And you might say that's crazy talk, right? Here's Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
To be fair, we had helped to create the problem we're now fighting. How? Because when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, we had this brilliant idea that we were going to come to Pakistan and create a force of Mujahideen, equip them with Stinger missiles and everything else to go after the Soviets inside Afghanistan. And we were successful. The Soviets left Afghanistan, and then we said, great, goodbye, leaving these trained people who were fanatical in Afghanistan and Pakistan, leaving them well armed, creating a mess, frankly, that at the time we didn't really recognize. We were just so happy to see the Soviet Union fall, and we thought, okay, fine, we're okay now. Everything's going to be so much better. Now you look back, the people we're fighting today, we were supporting in the fight against the Soviets.
So it's not a conspiracy theory, it's history. And it's history that's being repeated in Libya and now in Syria. But there is a bigger problem here, one that every American should be questioning. We're fighting al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, but we're also bombing al-Qaeda targets in Pakistan and in Yemen. And as we do that, something occurs known as collateral damage. Hundreds of civilians in Yemen have been killed in just the first half of 2012 by U.S. airstrikes aimed at al-Qaeda fighters.
We also have a history of kind of moving in and out of Pakistan. I mean, let's remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago. And we did it because we were locked in this struggle with the Soviet Union. They invaded Afghanistan, and we did not want to see them control Central Asia. And we went to work. And it was President Reagan in partnership with the Congress, led by Democrats, who said, you know what, sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's deal with the ISI and the Pakistani military, and let's go recruit these Mujahideen. And that's great. Let's get some to come from Saudi Arabia and other places, importing their Wahhabi brand of Islam so that we can go beat the Soviet Union. And guess what? They retreated. They lost billions of dollars, and it led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. So there's a very strong argument, which is, it wasn't a bad investment to end the Soviet Union, but let's be careful what we sow because we will harvest. And we now are making up for a lot of lost time.
So what you need to know tonight is heavy. Our government is bombing sites around the world in an ongoing war with Al-Qaeda. In Iraq, where Al-Qaeda had no presence before the U.S. war, Al-Qaeda is now thriving. The same Al-Qaeda, yes, created by the U.S. government in order to harm the Soviets. And today, at least 13,000 civilians in Afghanistan are dead as a result of that war with Al-Qaeda. So with all respect to Ms. Fitzgerald from the Irish Times, this is not propaganda. Rather, it is the question that every American should be demanding answers on from Congress and from this president. Why are we giving Al-Qaeda fighters money and weapons to overthrow yet another government in the Middle East? Today, our government claims they're freeing the people of Syria. Tomorrow, if history tells us anything, we will be killing and wounding civilians in airstrikes and then referring to them as collateral damage in a war with an enemy who we brought to power.
So if you think if we walked away from this, didn't give them money today, it would be worse for us from a security standpoint?
I do. We're building a relationship that just did not exist. I said in our last trip when you were with me that we had a huge trust deficit, in part because the United States had, to be fair, we had helped to create the problem we're now fighting.
How?
Because when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, we had this brilliant idea that we were going to come to Pakistan and create a force of mujahideen, equip them with Stinger missiles and everything else to go after the Soviets inside Afghanistan. And we were successful. The Soviets left Afghanistan, and then we said, great, goodbye, leaving these trained people who were fanatical in Afghanistan and Pakistan, leaving them well armed, creating a mess, frankly, that at the time we didn't really recognize. We were just so happy to see the Soviet Union fall, and we thought, okay, fine, we're okay now. Everything's going to be so much better. Now you look back, the people we're fighting today, we were supporting in the fight against the Soviets.
We have had several studies at this point, which I will go into, as to trying to determine a plausible scenario for the collapse. As of this point, none of them have presented us with anything that I think could be reasonably called a convincing and detailed account of why the collapse has occurred. And the question that's been addressed previously, the enormous destruction of physical evidence, as Chris was saying, the site was scrubbed very thoroughly. Out of the entire mass of the buildings that were destroyed, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, who are now doing the ongoing investigation, managed to save about 240 pieces out of the entire building. All of the rest of it was basically recycled. The obvious question is what does it mean that there was a controlled demolition? At the simplest level, it means that someone had a lot of access to the buildings over a long enough period of time to set this up. It implies, as many other things have tonight, that the people who had effective control of the site had an interest in having it scrubbed and making sure that no information was available, that a forensic reconstruction couldn't be done. Even in much smaller catastrophes, we typically will reconstruct things as completely as possible. For example, TWA Flight 800 pieces were dredged off the bottom of the sea. A complete reconstruction was done to allow a detailed analysis. In this case, the exact opposite was done. The first report that was really issued on this was issued by FEMA in collaboration with the American Society of Civil Engineers. There was basically a volunteer team from ASCE that had very limited access to the site. A lot of the pieces that they were able to retrieve were retrieved by going to landfills and trying to find interesting pieces before they were disposed of. The initial FEMA report basically acknowledged that the kerosene would have burned off very quickly. What wasn't destroyed in the initial fireball would have been consumed fairly rapidly and would have only really served as an ignition for the rest of the material. And the second point being that the fuel here really was strictly office contents. If you think of a modern office with copying machines, computers, and as has been previously mentioned, the smoke, particularly from Building 2 just before it collapsed, was very black looking. This is generally an indication of an inefficient fire in which there's not enough oxygen for the amount of fuel. These types of fires typically burn very cool. They are not hot flames like blowtorches. The cores themselves, basically, if you've seen diagrams of the building, there's a large central rectangle in each of the towers that contained 47 columns. And these columns basically were the primary structural support of the building. They were given the role of supporting the whole gravitational load of the building. Since they were so strong, it would have been reasonable to think that they would have withstood, at least to some extent, the collapse. But in fact, as we see after the buildings collapsed, there was basically only little stubs of these things standing up a floor or two above the ground level. The cores did not have much in them that would burn. The cores basically were dedicated to things like elevator shafts, utility shafts, stairways. So you have drywall material, you have a little bit of carpeting, you don't really have any inflammable material in the core itself. The core was specifically designed so it could not function as a chimney. They did not want, in the case of a fire, for the fire to be able to travel through the elevators or for air to come in through the elevators. So they were designed with what this architect, Aaron Swirsky, I believe it was, referred to as a hermetically sealed system. There were fire shutters that were designed to close off the core in the event of an event like this. And those, as far as we know, functioned properly, which means that there was a very limited amount of oxygen available. Okay, as far as the issue of what failed and how, some of the initial suggestions, and these showed up in the NOVA documentary, which is a good example of what I like to call proof by computer animation. Thomas Egar, who was a material scientist but not a structural engineer, who became a spokesman for these documentaries, indicated that the floors had somehow failed, that the trusses supporting the floors had failed. This was the theory that was put forward actually in the initial FEMA report. Subsequently, there have been basically complete contradictions of that. Jim Hoffman has done quite a bit of research which is available on the web concerning the problems with this idea that the floors would have simply fallen. There was a study done by Weidlinger Associates. The chief engineer there was Mathis Levy, who's a very well-known authority on building collapses. He specifically disavowed the idea of pancaking or collapsing of the floors. And the most recent official report we have on this, which is from National Institutes of Standards and Technology, NIST, rejected the idea that floor collapse was part of it. And so as a result, we have basically no sequential model at this point. What NIST has suggested is that there was some kind of simultaneous collapse of the cores, but they have not attempted to give any kind of modeling as to whether those cores could have in fact been destroyed by the fires in the way that they claim. Unfortunately, the material that would have allowed a detailed fire analysis, the actual physical evidence, is all gone.
The 110-story World Trade Center towers were designed to withstand the impact of a commercial jetliner. Yet within 2 hours of the attacks, both collapse. So why did the Twin Towers fail so disastrously and so quickly? Under public pressure, the U.S. government commissions a $16 million investigation from the National Institute of Standards and Technology in an attempt to explain the structural failures of the towers. They examine the debris from the disaster, run hundreds of computer simulations, and conduct extensive lab tests. The official government report into the Twin Towers tragedy only tackled events on the initial impact floors, not the physics behind the subsequent collapse. It left the field wide open for conspiracy theorists who point to the unexpectedly rapid collapse amid reports of explosions. Nuclear chemist Dr. Frank Greening was also surprised that the towers collapsed so quickly.
I watched this whole thing unfold like everybody did, and then of course the South Tower collapses. The top section just crushes the lower section. A little later the North Tower does the same thing, and I'm just shocked, horrified, and I say to myself, how could this happen?
Greening felt that until the mechanics of the collapse were properly understood, the fanatical rumors would simply not go away. He decided to calculate whether the towers would collapse under their own weight, without the need for explosives.
First thing I felt needed to be cleared up was, could the building collapse the way we saw it, or did it actually need help from explosives, as some people were suggesting? I really threw myself into 9/11 research, and I decided I wanted to apply science, physics to studying this problem. I set up a computer program based on momentum transfer to look at each impact of each floor.
Greening's momentum transfer program calculated the weight of the buildings above the impact floors. He discovered that if one floor failed, the weight of the higher floors would cause each floor below to give way exactly as seen. As the impacts were on different floors, the simulation would need to account for the differing mass above each. There were 15 floors above the impact point in the North Tower, and 22 floors above the South Tower. Frank's calculations would also need to prove that the floors below each impact point would disintegrate in a manner that looks similar to a controlled demolition.
I ran the program. It showed that the buildings would indeed come down. Even more interesting was the computer program predicted the collapse times.
The North Tower falls in 13 seconds, but with a greater number of floors above the impact site of the South Tower, it takes only 11 seconds.
Once the building started to collapse, there was no stopping it. It was a juggernaut. The mass of the upper block in the North Tower is equivalent to the mass of the Titanic. It's about 38,000 tons.
Is that all three collapses were pretty close to classic examples of what they call controlled demolition. When dynamite or some kind of explosives are placed throughout the building at all the crucial points, and then they put them on a computer and they bring them down in a certain order, and therefore the building comes straight down so it doesn't fall on these other buildings, and they come down in virtually free fall speed. And that's what happened here. All three buildings. You can see them on all sorts of places on the website. You don't see them on TV anymore. They showed them the first night, and Dan Rather, you know, bless his soul, comes right out and blurts out the truth. He says, boy, that looks just like controlled demolition. The 9/11 Commission also does not tell you that Marvin Bush, the president's brother, and their cousin, Wirt Walker, were the principals of the company that was in charge of security for the World Trade Center. They don't, all sorts of coincidences here. They also don't tell you that there were many reports of people who worked in the building saying, you know, we got a shutdown order, so for 3 days we couldn't go in the World Trade Center. There were engineers coming in and out. We didn't know it.
Again, his name is Scott Forbes. He joins us from across the pond today. Scott, thank you for making time for us.
You're very welcome. Hello.
Let's see, where do we start here? We don't have a lot of time, but I think what we should do first off is, just tell us maybe what the atmosphere was leading up to 9/11, exactly what your job was and what you did there in the World Trade Center towers.
Sure. I worked for, as you said, Fiduciary Trust in the South Tower. I was based on the 97th floor, where our data center was. About 3 weeks prior to 9/11, our company, along with many others in the towers, were given notice that there was going to be a power down in the top 50% of floors in the Southern Tower. This was unprecedented. As you can imagine, a lot of financial institutions in the building, and to have a complete loss of power meant a complete loss of systems. And for an organization like my company, it was truly extraordinary.
I mean, people probably scrambling as soon as they could to secure their systems before the power down.
Yep, that was part of the deal.
Have there been, let me, because for the sake of time, I want to keep this moving as much as possible, Scott. Had there been any power downs like this? Again, you were notified by the Port Authority there'd be a 36-hour power down at the top half of your tower. Had there been anything like this prior to this particular power down, and exactly give us a time frame of when you were notified about the power down as related to 9/11. What was the date of the power down, and had there been one prior to this?
Okay, the power down was on the Saturday and Sunday prior to 9/11, so that would have been the 8th and 9th of September. We were given 3 weeks notice. It was relatively a short time notice period to make all the preparations needed. And it was unprecedented. We'd never experienced a power down in the towers, as far as I am aware. I had worked in the towers from 1998. My colleagues who had been in the building well beyond that could not remember an occasion such as this, apart from the bomb incident in the early 90s.
Well, let's move to this, Scott, because now the power has been down, and you see a number of maintenance workers coming into the building. What was in your mind suspicious or notably suspicious about some of these workers coming in to come in for the power down?
Actually, at the time, I wasn't suspicious at all. It was just part of the fact that there was a power down and that there were workers in overalls in the building.
But looking back now, you noticed that there were some suspicious behavior with these workers.
Well, of course, looking back, you question everything, and you wonder, well, one of the main reasons why I became suspicious was I got in touch with the Port Authority, and I got in touch with the 9/11 Commission to register this piece of information so that it would be acknowledged, if only to be thrown away. And I had no acknowledgement. They did not come back to me. I repeatedly called and wrote letters to them. I've had no acknowledgement. It's as if this information is of no interest to anyone. But to me, it seems to be part of the puzzle and should be registered. I was not in the office on 9/11 because of working that weekend. I had the day off on the Tuesday, and so I was in my apartment, which overlooked the Trade Center. I lived in Jersey City, across the river from the towers, so I was eyewitness to what went on there. And as soon as I saw the first tower go down, the South Tower, I was highly suspicious. It just didn't look correct. It looked like a controlled demolition. It did not look like a building collapsing either from an aircraft hitting it or from a fire inside. It seemed to crumble into dust.
Yeah.
It just didn't ring true.
Building 7 in the World Trade Center complex is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing.
You hear that? Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down. The building is about to blow up. Move it back.
Is Building 7 at the World Trade Center, and that building is in danger of collapse as it continues to burn.
According to authorities at this moment here in Lower Manhattan, and that is the growing fear that another building in the World Trade Center complex, which was not struck by an airplane, is in danger of collapsing.
Medical student, he was down there, he was trying to help people. His name is Daryl.
Yeah, so I was just standing there, we were watching the building actually because it was on fire. The bottom floors of the building were on fire, and we heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. Turned around, we were shocked to see that the building was, it looked like there was a shock wave ripping through the building.
There's still concern about a building right there.
And the windows all busted out, and it was horrifying.
One of those buildings, Building 7, I believe we said, in danger of collapsing.
Miller realizes that 7 World Trade Center is next to fall.
See where the white smoke is? You see this thing leaning like this? It's definitely going to happen. There's no way to stop it.
No tall building had ever collapsed primarily due to fire. But that's exactly what investigators believe happened to the 47-story World Trade Center Building 7 on September.
Had moved back from that building before, which you're about to see again here on videotape, knowing that fire could not be fought because of the instability of the structure, because of the fire that had burned since shortly after 9 o'clock this morning.
Dana Tyler is joining us.
Looking like a preschool just movie covered in plastic, I swear to God. What do you got with you, man? That's some good shit. Then we went back there. Whoa!
If anybody out there can help, any vendors who have food or supplies, the firemen have no food, nothing but snacks. They need fluids, they need water, and they need protein foods. This is just the beginning of what they're facing. And we need masks. We need TB masks. Holy shit! What is it?
It just went down.
What just went down?
World Trade 7.
It did.
Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself.
Describe that.
Now we go to videotape, the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
Engineers are not just focusing on the Twin Towers. The most disturbing structural event was not that the Twin Towers fell, but that Tower 7, ignited by flying debris, fell due to fire alone.
The failure of the building was an implosion. So it failed completely different than Towers 1 and 2, in which the floors failed first.
About an hour after the actual explosion, which was about 9:15 in the morning, if you wanted to calculate a time to cause maximum disruption, you would calculate that time as the start of the working day and perhaps the biggest, busiest complex in the world.
This is Building 7 in the World Trade Center area is collapsing. Now, whether we don't even know whether this was something that was engineered for safety reasons or it just happened as a consequence of the two collisions this morning.
And since then, the most recent collapse, which happened just a short while ago, Building 7, a 47-story building as part of the World Trade Center complex, collapsed. That building had been, we were told, completely evacuated. But the fate of people on the ground, including rescue workers, as it came tumbling down, we simply don't know. But it had been threatening to collapse, had been on the verge of collapse for a long while, so perhaps most of the area had been evacuated. But who could have anticipated this kind of incredibly dense
Late this afternoon, just before 5:30 p.m., the number 7 building at the World Trade Center also collapsed. NBC
You should move out of your apartment, Fabiana. Yes. You've got Carolina here?
Yes. They advise us to leave because we have...
Oh, my God. Look behind us. Please pan in this way. Please be careful of your baby. This is it.
That's the building coming down.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. No. No. Listen. We'll be all right. We'll be all right.
We're okay. Ashley! I think we're okay. Ashley, I think we're okay.
All right. We're going to have to move this way. We're going to have to move. We're going to have to move. That cloud is coming this way.
Yeah. Ashley, get out of there. Leave the camera.
By police that you should move out of your apartment, Fabiana. Yes. You've got Carolina here?
Yes. They advise us to leave because we have...
Oh, my God. Look behind us. Please pan in this way. Please be careful of your baby. This is it.
That's the building coming down.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. No. No. We're...
There are going to be a lot of claims and counterclaims in the course of the next 24 hours or so.
I referred to
like 7 World Trade Center just collapsed. Look at this. Unbelievable.
I told you that sucker was going to go.
That's coming here, isn't it?
What, the cloud?
Yeah, look at that.
Oh, yeah.
A 47-story skyscraper. It's converted all of its gravitational potential energy into kinetic energy. Therefore, it can't crush the 40,000 tons of structural steel that's holding it up and fall.
Yeah, I got it. I got it.
Rick used time-lapse mode to conserve tape. So 2 seconds of real-time recording is followed by a 6-second pause. The first footage is shortened and speeded up to get straight to the collapse.
Here's an update now from the 1010 Winds newsroom. Later tonight, we expect to hear from President Bush. That plane was debuted in here's Matt Ward. Difficulties around the area. New Jersey Transit outbound Hoboken terminal operating on a load-and-go basis, no inbound service, and also out of Newark Penn Station, limited service on the Northeast Corridor and North Jersey coastline.
Look at it now as you continue to describe what you have seen. We're looking at the tape now, Jeff.
Okay, good. This once again happened only within the last few minutes. We saw
Command Center. The original command center, called the Bunker, was housed inside 7 World Trade Center. That building collapsed on September 11th after burning much of the day. The first bunker cost $13 million. It was built to withstand hurricane strength.
The World Trade Center. According to Con Edison, potentially dangerous chemicals were kept in 7 World Trade Center. Con Ed says before that building collapsed, it housed 109,000 gallons of oil and hundreds of pounds of potentially dangerous chemicals in 2 electrical substations.
Succumbed to a raging oil fire within and fell to the ground.
I didn't see any reason for that building to fall down the way it did, and a lot of guys should be saying the same thing. Watching all day. This is like watching the collapse of an active volcano, and the dust from it is not unlike that from a volcano. We are on the phone with New York Fire Department Lieutenant David Restuccio. Lieutenant, where are you right now?
I'm at the corner of Northmore Street and Greenwich Street.
Can you confirm it was number 7 that just went in?
Yes, sir.
And you guys knew this was coming all day.
We had heard reports that the building was unstable and that it eventually would either come down on its own or it would be taken down. I would imagine it came down on its own, and we are just awaiting now at our triage for any other casualties or any other injuries.
Everybody all right where you are, Lieutenant?
Very, very much so.
They actually used the word brought down, and who was it that was telling you this?
The fire department. And they did use the word we're going to have to bring it down.
And for us, there, observing the nature of the devastation, it made total sense to us that this was indeed a possibility.
He says, well, you got to stay behind this line because they're thinking about bringing the building down. They didn't say what building, they just said bringing a building down. So we're like, okay, you know, we'll take their word for it, you know, we'll stay behind the line.
Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse. For the first time, we have shown that fire can induce a progressive collapse.
See the rush below on the street as people continue to run. Many of the cars.
And a great ball of fire, smoke started billowing out.
There was a voice in the Secretary Rumsfeld, a huge explosion. We can see a cascade of sparks.
The 9/11 attack on America looked so much like a formula action-packed Hollywood disaster movie that it had "Made in the USA" written all over it. The only difference is it used real props and real people. It had terrorist villains, American firefighter heroes, fireball explosions, collapsing buildings, pedestrians chased by dust clouds, and it even had a God Bless America music score. Well-positioned cameras shot the action-packed drama from every conceivable angle.
Just the picture of the helicopter landing and the president walking in. And then the
19 hijackers have been Saudi nationals. So in the terrible... He said that he didn't believe that Osama bin Laden...
No one has blamed or accused him formally.
That how many people worked in the city is confirming that some 265 firefighters are believed.
None of us will ever forget this day.
People who knock these buildings down will hear all of it soon.
Since America remembers Sunday, 85th.
The timing, the title, and the eerie advertisement for Harvey Weinstein's Lord of the Rings movie called The Two Towers was a prophetic and disturbing coincidence. Profits from the Two Towers movie were small change compared to the 9/11 reality disaster movie, which has become the world's top-grossing production of all time. The only thing missing are the 9/11 producer, writer, and director credits. But it doesn't take an Enron accountant to figure out who's cashing in. During the first week, the 911 producers made a spectacular fortune just on the stock market alone. How? By knowing in advance that the stocks in airline and insurance companies associated with the 911 crash would fall in value. Using that inside information, they made negative bets on the stock market called put options. Put options are bets that a certain stock will fall in value by a certain date. It's big risk gambling, unless you've got inside information that can turn your bet into a sure thing. But that's illegal if you get caught at it. Put option bets on the decline in 911 related airline and insurance stocks skyrocketed by a whopping 600% just before 911, which means that somebody knew about the attacks before they happened. Who exactly were those somebodies? Merrill Lynch and HSBC? Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, the Bank of America, weapons manufacturer Raytheon, the Lehman Brothers, General Motors, Swiss Re, Munich Re, and AXA Re Insurance Company, which owns 25% of American Airlines. These insiders bought put options through Deutsche Bank.
Most demanding clients trust Deutsche Bank to perform. Deutsche Bank, a passion.
Buzzy Krongard, the former executive director of the CIA, just happened to be the manager of Deutsche Bank. And so the profiteers from 9/11 were not Osama bin Laden or his band of U.S.-trained Arabs. They were blue-chip Israeli, U.S., and British businessmen. Within the first week, the 9/11 producers sucked up $40 billion in box office profits from U.S. taxpayers who were hypnotized, terrorized, and traumatized by the infinite reruns.
Think of it as a conspiracy theory true or false test. A. When George W. Bush started his first oil company, who helped fund it? Osama bin Laden's brother and brother-in-law. True or false? B. After a terrorist bomb at a barracks in Saudi Arabia killed 19 Americans, who got the multi-million-dollar contract to rebuild? The bin Ladens. True or false? C. On the morning of September 11, 2001, who was in a meeting at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Washington? George Bush Sr. and Osama bin Laden's brother. True or false? Actually, the answer could be D, all of the above. Because believe it or not, as far-fetched as they sound, each and every one of those things, the bin Laden link to the Bush Oil Company, the bin Laden construction contract after the terrorist bomb, and the bin Laden-Bush meeting on 9/11, is true.
Many of the facts surrounding the events of 9/11 point to a cover-up, like the fact that the Bush administration ignored all of the advance warnings of the 9/11 attacks. Warnings from FBI agents like Colleen Rowley and from the famous Phoenix memo were not only ignored, they were suppressed. FBI Deputy Director John P. O'Neill quit his job when his investigation of Osama bin Laden was blocked. According to a September 24th Newsweek article, top Pentagon officials canceled their travel plans for 9/11 because of security concerns. While the American public were sitting ducks, all of America's political, military, and corporate VIPs were kept out of harm's way. 2 Muslims accused of the 9/11 hijackings took their flight training at Rudy Decker's Huffman Aviation School in Florida. Rudy Decker's is linked to the CIA and drug smuggling through Carib Air and Britannia Aviation, which shared the same small Venice airport with Decker's. The media reported that on the night before the attacks, accused ringleader Mohammed Atta and 2 other Muslim hijackers got drunk, fondled naked dancers in a Florida strip club called Shuckums, forgot their business card and their Quran holy book at the bar, publicly bashed America, and loudly boasted about impending bloodshed the next day. Would devoted and highly secretive Muslim hijackers risk their planned mission by attracting so much negative attention? And why were they in Florida instead of Boston the night before their suicide flights? On the early morning of September 11th, 19 Muslim men well known to intelligence and security agencies supposedly waltzed past airport security checks, boarded 4 passenger planes, and turned them into deadly missiles without even a hitch. By 8:13 a.m., flight controllers temporarily lost radar contact with American Airlines Flight 11 and reported a suspected hijacking. Even though Andrews Air Force Base is only 10 minutes from Washington, emergency response fighter jets took close to an hour instead of the typical 15 minutes to scramble and begin searching for the hijacked planes. By then, it was too late. President Bush already knew about the first Flight 11, which occurred at 8:46 a.m., when he sat down to chat with school kids at Booker Elementary School. It wasn't until 9:05 a.m. that he was notified that a second plane, Flight 175, had also crashed into the World Trade Center and that America was under attack. Instead of being whisked to safety in this national emergency, Bush nodded and continued chatting with the kids for another 20 minutes about a pet goat, while American citizens were burning alive and leaping to their death from the smoking towers.
Wailing against the wind as they fell, almost as if they had second thoughts. It was absolutely horrifying.
And you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to wonder exactly what President George W. Bush knew about the attack, and when he knew it. According to the official White House version, it was at this moment in a Florida classroom that Bush learned the second plane had hit the World Trade Center and that the U.S. was under attack. But here's what George Bush himself said almost 3 months later when asked about September 11th.
I was sitting outside the classroom waiting to go in, and I saw an airplane hit the tower of a TV. You know, the TV was obviously on, and I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. And it said it must have been a horrible accident. But I was whisked off there. I didn't have much time to think about it.
Now, wait a minute. George Bush was told about the second plane while he was inside the classroom. So you just heard him describe seeing the first plane crash on television that day. But that's impossible. No one saw the first plane crash on TV on September the 11th because the videotape of it didn't surface until the next day.
At 9:55 a.m., President George W. Bush took off in Air Force One with no escort or protection from fighter jets and circled around for the next hour. Why was the president's plane airborne and unescorted for an entire hour while hijacked planes were roaming the skies? The inexperienced hijacker pilots who took only a simulated flying course reportedly flew the third hijacked plane, Flight 77, into a Top Gun 270-degree turn, bypassed the offices of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and crashed into an insignificant part of the Pentagon that was under renovation. Emergency response Air Force fighter jets were finally airborne when a fourth hijacked plane, Flight 93, crashed into a field in Pennsylvania at 10:06 a.m. The media reported that passengers overpowered the hijackers, but nearby residents saw U.S. fighter jets overhead and gave eyewitness reports of debris falling from the sky. That debris was found 8 miles away, indicating that the plane had been shot down. Within hours of the 911 hijackings, a massive Blame the Muslims campaign was launched by CNN and the media and continues to this day. In less than 48 hours, the names and mugshots of 19 accused Muslims were flashed across TV screens. If government investigators knew nothing, how did they identify 19 Muslim men as the hijackers so fast from fake passports and with no DNA evidence? How could Muhammad Atta's passport survive the fireball explosion that supposedly cremated him, fly out of his pocket, fly out of the incinerated plane, flutter to the ground into 2 feet of debris, and end up in readable condition in the hands of investigators, all within 48 hours? Why did 19 Muslim men even need passports on domestic flights? How were passports found but not the plane's voice recorders? Why did the hijackers need passports they would never use again after their suicide flights? And why were the 19 accused Muslims not under surveillance on 911 if they were so easy to identify? The suitcase of accused ringleader Muhammad Atta was never loaded onto the hijacked plane and conveniently fell right into the hands of investigators. It was jam-packed with incriminating evidence, including a Quran, a how to fly a commercial airplane video, and a fuel consumption indicator. Why would a hijacker about to die on a suicide mission pack a suitcase? It seems Muhammad Atta was a very forgetful ringleader who carried around a lot of Quran holy books. He reportedly forgot one Quran in a Florida strip club, another in a rental car, and still another one in his lost suitcase at the airport. More incriminating evidence of flight manuals written in Arabic, were found within hours of the attacks in parked rental cars at the airports. Why didn't the terrorists take a taxi to the airport? Can they be that smart and that stupid at the same time? The conspicuous trail of planted evidence continued 3 weeks after the 9/11 attacks, when anthrax letters killed 5 people and were clearly worded to throw the blame on Muslims. Death to America, death to Israel, Allah is great. It has since been proven that the anthrax came from a U.S. Army lab and was never mailed by Muslims. Were the 19 Muslims accused of the hijacking set up as patsies and framed? If so, who set them up? Right after the attacks, CNN deceptively and repeatedly showed an airport security video of Mohammed Atta. CNN neglected to tell viewers that the video showed Mohammed Atta boarding a plane at Portland, Maine, not the hijacked plane. There are no airport security videos of any of the 19 accused Muslims boarding any of the hijacked planes. Right after the 9/11 attacks, CNN reported that the U.S. government had a tape recording of Osama bin Laden telling his mother that something big was about to happen and that she wouldn't be seeing him for a while. CNN later acknowledged that the report was false. Osama bin Laden consistently denied being involved in 9/11 and claimed the Israeli Zionists were behind the attacks. According to Japanese, Chinese, and Indian news reports, Osama bin Laden was killed in Afghanistan in the fall of 2001 and was buried in an unmarked grave by his own men.
Following the money trail, Osama bin Laden. Army sources telling me, even via Iraq, via other places overseas, we know where he is. We're on him. It's just a matter of time. Do you agree with that?
I believe he's dead.
Really?
I'm 98% positive that we killed him in December of 2001 during the Tor War campaign. I've seen no proof of life since then, regardless of these tapes that are cobbled together.
On Halloween 2004, just before the U.S. presidential election, this man, dressed in an Osama bin Laden costume, confessed to the 9/11 attacks, scared American voters, and tricked them into treating George Bush to another 4 years in the White House. Zionist extremists believe that Hebrew Jews are God's chosen race of people with a God-given right to the land of Israel. The Muslim world and millions of Europeans, including Germany's former Minister of Technology, Andreas von Bülow, believe that Zionist extremists staged the 9/11 attacks on America to ignite the war on terrorism. That war has targeted Israel's Muslim enemies and is being fought and paid for with the blood, the lives, and the tax dollars of terrorized American citizens. Half the world believes that 9/11 was a conspiracy carried out by Islamic Muslim extremists with financing from Muslim charities. The other half believes it was a conspiracy carried out by Jewish Zionists with financing from Jewish charities. Is there any evidence to support that belief? Since 9/11, FBI Director Mueller, BBC News, and ABC have confirmed that 7 of the 19 Muslims whose mugshots were flashed around the world did not die in the 9/11 crashes. They are alive and well and are victims of identity theft. An 8th accused Muslim died 1 year before the 9/11 hijackings even occurred. Who stole their identities, and why isn't the FBI looking for them? If the hijackers really were Muslims, Why would they steal the identities of fellow Muslims and implicate them? Wouldn't they be more likely to steal Israeli identities and put the blame on Israelis? If the hijackers were Israelis, wouldn't they be likely to steal the identities of Muslims and put the blame on Muslims? Even though no one has been officially charged or convicted of the 9/11 hijackings, CNN and the 5 Western media monopolies have exclusively sold the American people on a Muslim conspiracy. Unfortunately, the only eyewitnesses capable of positively identifying the hijackers died on board the hijacked planes. Before flight attendant Amy Sweeney was killed on hijacked Flight 11, she picked up an airphone and reported that 4 Middle Eastern-looking men had hijacked the plane. The fact is that Israeli men are Middle Eastern men who just happen to be Middle Eastern-looking. The voice of the hijacker heard from the hijacked plane's voice recorder reveals that the accent of the hijacker matches an Israeli Hebrew accent.
Stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're heading to the airport.
The next transmission comes seconds later.
Nobody move. Everything will be okay. If you try to make any move, you'll danger yourself and the airplane. Just stay quiet.
After 9/11, 1,000 Middle Eastern-looking Muslim men were swept into U.S. custody, but the media kept quiet about 60 Middle Eastern-looking Israeli men who were also taken into custody and held under great secrecy. On December 11th, Carl Cameron of Fox News ran the first of a 4-part series about a group of Israelis who were among the 9/11 suspects. These detained Israelis failed polygraph tests about their surveillance activities against the U.S. and were caught videotaping the 9/11 attacks from different angles. Fox News also reported that the evidence linking these Israelis to 9/11 was classified, but a leaked 61-page report from the U.S. government's Drug Enforcement Agency revealed that another 120 Israelis, posing as artists, were also rounded up right after 9/11. Carrying counterfeit visas and green cards, the Israelis admitted that they served in the Israeli army in explosives, electronic, and military intelligence units. Did Middle Eastern-looking Israelis who were detained as suspects after 9/11 steal the identities of the accused Muslims? The leaked DEA report revealed that Israelis with Israeli military backgrounds had posed as artists and lived on Sheridan Street in Hollywood, Florida, just down the street from Mohammed Atta and 3 other accused Muslims. On August 18th, 1 month before the 9/11 attacks, a New York Times article by reporter Sheila K. Dewan described a group of 4 foreign artists who smuggled their way into the World Trade Center just months before 9/11. The artists occupied studio space free of charge on the 91st floor with 14 other artists and claimed to be writing a book called The Bee Thing. They also claimed that they constructed a temporary balcony on the 91st floor as a prank. Somehow, these so-called artist pranksters escaped the attention of the World Trade Center's heavy security companies. George W. Bush's brother, Marvin Bush, just happened to be the director of Securicom, which provided electronic security for the World Trade Center. By some mysterious coincidence, Marvin Bush's company also provided electronic security for 911's United Airlines and 911's Dulles Airport. So what were 18 foreign artists really doing living free of charge in one of the world's most expensive rental spaces? Many top engineering and demolition experts believe that the Twin Towers were rigged with explosives which caused the buildings to implode vertically in a typical controlled demolition. The reason the collapsing buildings looked like a controlled demolition, say experts, is because they were a controlled demolition. Photos and video recordings confirm that explosions occurred at the base of the 2 towers as well as in Building 7 before they fell. On September 24th, firefighter Louis Caccioli told People Weekly point blank, "We think there were bombs set in the building." That claim was echoed by many witnesses and by firefighters who heard the explosions just before Tower 1, Tower 2, and Building 7 collapsed. The steel-supported twin towers were built to withstand the impact of a passenger jetliner, yet the official explanation for their collapse is that the burning jet fuel heated the steel support beams and caused them to buckle. Expert independent investigators insist that it's impossible for jet fuel burning in oxygen to melt steel, and that most of the jet fuel burned up outside the buildings in clearly visible fireballs. After the crashes, the white smoke turned black, indicating cooling temperatures, not rising temperatures as reported. Why did a company called Controlled Demolition quickly haul away, melt down, and dispose of 499,850 pieces of structural steel that could have proved the temperature the steel had reached and the use of explosives? Why did Tower 2, that was hit last, fall first, 53 minutes after being struck, whereas Tower 1 fell 1 hour and 28 minutes after being struck? An even bigger mystery is why Building 7, owned by Larry Silverstein, collapsed much later on in the afternoon, even though it had never even been hit. If these 3 World Trade Center buildings were rigged with explosives, when could the explosives have been installed, and who controlled access to the buildings? The 30-year-old World Trade Center has always been publicly owned and managed by the New York, New Jersey Port Authority. That is, until a Jewish businessman named Louis Eisenberg became the chairman. Eisenberg is an active leader in Jewish Zionist organizations. He personally oversaw negotiations that put the publicly owned World Trade Center into private hands. Those private hands belonged to 2 Jewish pro-Zionist billionaires named Larry Silverstein and Frank Lowy, even though their bid was lower than other bids. Lowy served as a commando in the Israeli army, and Silverstein just happens to be the former chairman of the United Jewish Israel Appeal. With Eisenberg's help, they landed the 99-year lease worth $8 billion for half price at $3.5 billion. During the moving, renovations, and security changeovers, explosives could have easily been installed in the buildings without detection. George W.'s brother, Marvin Bush, was not only the director of the World Trade Center's electronic security company, he was also the director of the World Trade Center's casualty insurance company called Houston Casualty. That company terminated their insurance coverage for the World Trade Center before 9/11, right in the nick of time. Another suspicious company occupied the 16th and 17th floors of the North Tower. That company, called Zim Israeli American Shipping, suddenly broke their lease, paid a $50,000 penalty, and moved out of the World Trade Center only weeks before 9/11. Zim Israeli American Shipping is owned by Zim Israel Navigation, which just happens to be owned by the government of Israel. If the new owners, Silverstein and Lowy, knew about the 9/11 attacks in advance, why did they buy a 99-year lease to the doomed buildings? Because they could do the simple math. Silverstein bought the $3.5 billion World Trade Center with only a $15 million down payment, which amounts to 0.01% of the total. He took out maximum terrorist insurance coverage only 6 weeks before the attacks. The demolition of the World Trade Center buildings on 9/11 eliminated Silverstein's cost for an $800 million facelift to update the aging 30-year-old buildings. As soon as the spanking new World Trade Center is finally built and expanded to over 11 million square feet of rental space, Silverstein stands to pocket billions of dollars per month. In the meantime, U.S. taxpayers are covering Silverstein's so-called losses. Then there's the big payouts from insurance policies with mega-terrorism insurance, which Silverstein took out just weeks before 9/11. Silverstein is demanding a 200% payout by claiming payouts for 2 separate 911 attacks instead of one. Silverstein's insurance companies, called Swiss Re and Munich Re, are the same companies under investigation for advanced knowledge of 911 and for profiting from 911 on the stock market. If Silverstein's insurance companies knew in advance about the attacks, why would they insure doomed buildings? Were these giant insurance companies handpicked to keep a lid on their insurance investigation findings and to ignore the evidence of 911 cover-ups? Silverstein has since bought out Frank Lowy, paid off investors and loan groups, put limits on victim compensation claims, and turned the publicly owned World Trade Center into the smelliest private real estate deal in American history. George W. Bush threw up permanent roadblocks to stop an independent investigation of the 911 events. When the 911 Senate Committee report was published, 27 pages that would have connected international banks to 911 were censored. On October 30th, 2003, a CBC television documentary investigated the 10-year friendship between the Bush family, the bin Laden family of Saudi Arabia, and the Saudi royal family. That friendship includes illegal presidential campaign contributions and partnerships in oil and weapons companies like the Carlyle Group. Since 9/11, 2,500 relatives of victims filed trillion-dollar lawsuits against 7 international banks, against the Saudi friends of the Bush family, and against the U.S. government for suppression of information. On 9/11, all U.S. flights were canceled, and desperate relatives of 9/11 victims were grounded.
48 hours later, September 13th, an update. Private flights were still prohibited. To take off required government approval at the highest level. That morning, Prince Bandar of Saudi Arabia visited the White House. And later that day, something unusual began to happen. Despite the blanket aviation ban, several private planes, from Learjets to a 747, were cleared to depart from various U.S. cities. On board were dozens of the Saudi elite, almost every one of bin Laden or a Saudi royal. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Alderman was desperate to find a way from Paris to New York, where her son Peter was missing.
The bin Laden family, whoever was in the United States, got safe passage home, and I couldn't get home to be with my children. Other families couldn't get to New York, who lived far away, to even begin to look for their children. At this point, we didn't know who was alive or who was dead. I couldn't get home, and the bin Laden family were all able to get home.
Since 15 of the 19 hijackers were accused of being Muslims from Saudi Arabia, why wasn't the fury of George W. Bush directed at Saudi Arabia instead of opium-rich Afghanistan and oil-rich Iraq? Before the first plane ever even hit the first tower on 9/11, a massive military buildup was organized near Afghanistan called Operation Swift Sword and Operation Bright Star. 23,000 British troops were sent to the Oman Gulf near Afghanistan, and 17,000 U.S. troops joined NATO troops in nearby Egypt. All of these forces were positioned for attacks on the Muslim countries of Afghanistan and Iraq before 9/11. The Patriot Act, which was designed to limit American citizens' democratic rights and freedoms, was also designed and written months before the first plane ever even hit the first tower.
Are you not entertained?